Hey folks, Guy here, and you're watching Off My Ridge. This week we are launching a new series on a campaign creation process that I will be going through to create a campaign that features the Borg as the big bad threat. And I thought I would share my journey with you as to my process and how I have created this campaign. And of course, patrons will get the adventures that I create in these episodes and ultimately the entire campaign once we have finished creating it. So if you want to become a patron, head on over to www.patreon.com/greatgamemaster, where you can sign up to start getting these adventures along with other cool bits and bobs. How do we create a campaign around the Borg? Well, the Borg are always seeking perfection, whether that's through the assimilation of technology or the assimilation of other species. They are looking for perfection. We're not entirely sure what that perfection looks like, however. It's definitely bipedal, it's some kind of collective organization, but what is that perfection? Is it ultimate efficiency? Is it ultimate immortality? What and where does it come from? We don't know the answer to that. So, to begin with, we need to decide on a time period. Anything before 2365, which is when officially the Federation met the Borg, anything before then, the Borg remain kind of mysterious, and we might hint at them, but ultimately we won't get to know them as the Borg. It's only after Picard encountered them that we learned of the Borg. Too late down the timeline, and you start getting to the weird stuff that happened in Picard's Season 2. I'm still not entirely sure of exactly what happened at the end of it, but it's vague. It doesn't make sense to my brain, so I'm going to ignore that. Instead, I'm going to choose a time period of 2375, because 2375 gives us a lot of latitude to play around with. Why 2375? Well, what I like to do is take the date and then go research it. What happened in the Star Trek universe in 2375? And there's lots of things that happened, primarily the ending of the Dominion War and the shutting down of Deep Space Nine under its normal capacity with the crew that it had. There was also something interesting that I found anyway that happened in 2375. Odo discovers one of the 100. Now, the 100 were 100 changelings that the founders sent out of the Gamma Quadrant to go and encounter sentient life. And when they were capable, to then return to the Amarian Nebula and share that experience with the founders. The idea was that if they encountered hostile species, they would kill the foundlings, and that would be it. On the other hand, if they encountered good sentient species who were worthy of communication, they would be nurtured and raised and then allowed to return to the Great Link, aka what happened to Odo. And then Picard Season 3 features what happens to the founders that were left behind, that didn't make it to the Great Link. There were some interesting hints going on there. Maybe I can combine two of the most dangerous enemies the Federation has ever had together. A Borg founder changeling thing, a Borg that can change its shape. That's very much like another franchise in the sci-fi genre, which I don't really want to go to. Besides, Borg assimilating changelings. Not for me. But I do like the idea of using a changeling, though, as a smokescreen. So when we're creating a campaign, we need to think of a campaign in 3 acts. Why 3, not 5, not 7, not 2, but 3? Well, because that's what we've settled on as a species. It gives us an introduction, a middle, and an end. And we're kind of happy with that. In the first act, the player characters shouldn't know what's going on. They should be gathering vague bits of information, and we should be learning about them. In the second act, that's where the characters should start to gather information, and by the middle of the second act, that's when they should try to resolve what they think is going on, only to discover that what they thought was going on is actually not what is going on, and that they basically have to start from scratch or are in an absolutely unrecoverable position and all seems lost. So that by the time that Act 3 comes around, they can triumphantly rise above the challenge of impossibility and overcome those odds. In Act 1, we don't include the Borg. We include other stuff that hints at the Borg or at the changeling, because we want the characters to believe that the changeling is the real threat, until the middle of Act 2, when they discover that the changeling is actually not part of this entire thing, or is, but not in a way that the players expected. What is the changeling doing? Well, the only thing I can think of is that changelings would be very good at infiltration, at spying, at observing, at masquerading to be almost anything. So what if our changeling, let's call him Hun, as in 100, has started to notice the Borg doing something? But Hun can't defeat the Borg on his own. Hun can't move against the Borg, as a matter of fact. Hun can only observe what the Borg are doing and try to work out where they're going. And Hun can also try to interfere with what the Borg are doing. Now, the Borg are not subtle. The Borg are not individuals who will sneak around behind anyone's backs. So what if Hun has worked out what the Borg are doing and is trying to prevent the Borg from simply assimilating entire species to get one critical component? What if he is stealing those components first and removing them from the Borg's equation, or is giving them to the Borg in a kind of, I will give you these things in exchange for you protecting this colony. You don't have to assimilate the entire colony just to get to this particular element or just to get this piece of technology. I'll get it for you. That way, the PCs, as they begin their journey in Act 1, will learn that there is this individual or group of individuals who are performing these incredulous heists, these thefts, these stealings. And there are also occasional events of colonies disappearing completely when the Borg just take what they want rather than waiting for the changeling to steal it for them. That means in Act 2, the PCs track down the changeling only to discover that he's actually the good guy trying to slow the Borg down because he's now figured out exactly what it is that they're doing and he can't stop them on his own. That sounds like a pretty cool, long-form campaign to me, especially because we then seem to need a reason. What are the Borg doing? What's the big MacGuffin? What threatens the universe? Well, they've tried to take over Earth multiple times, and that's never really worked out, and there are so many other places they could take over first, like the Herodian, for example. So what else could the Borg be doing? We know that the Borg tried to take over fluidic space, so they're obviously interested in traveling to different places. What if the Borg are building something big at the center of the galaxy? And I'm not talking they're trying to assimilate that weird alien god individual that Kirk encountered. Although that would be interesting, I don't see it really happening. What if instead, however, the Borg are attempting to use the centrifugal force of the galaxy and the incredible pressures and densities at the center of the galaxy to create a stable wormhole to the Andromeda galaxy? Forget this galaxy, we're going to go and assimilate an entire new galaxy that has nothing and no protections against the Borg. I think that could be quite cool. That could be quite fun, especially because if they do finish the wormhole, which inevitably they're going to do at the end of Act 2, because the players have to seem to be in the most impossible situation, the players could get pulled over into the Andromeda Galaxy and bingo, off we go on campaign number 2, getting home. You think Kathy had it bad with only 70,000 light years? Try being in a different galaxy. Now we have the bare bones of our campaign. Time to move on and to create the very first adventure, because this will set the tone for the entire thing. So the adventure, as usual, will follow the 5-step method of introduction to plot, journey to the plot point that they think, discover that the plot is not the plot, journey to new plot, and then get to the end of the plot and resolve it. So that's how we're going to follow through. We don't need the Borg, however, we just need the changeling, and we need the changeling stealing something or taking something from a civilization to prevent said civilization from being assimilated by the Borg. Adventure 1. The Impossible Case of the Hallis Red. The Hallis Red. The Impossible Case of the Hallis Red. There it is there. The crew are trying to trace down this Ferengi who has been dealing in stolen goods. And they eventually capture the Ferengi and he hands over everything. I bought it as a lot. I don't remember who it was from. It was a faceless person. Leave me alone. In amongst the debris and the stuff that the crew find, they find this spectacular goose egg-sized red gem. But the interior of the red gem is still liquid. And that makes it an incredibly rare 1 in 100 billion formations in 100 million planet type of rarity. It makes it incredibly useful at focusing super high-powered lasers, which are used in a variety of things, annular confinement beams being one sort of space where this could be used to improve the efficiency of a warp core by a factor of 100%. However, when they discover this amazing red ruby, the Federation contacts the crew. There is a planet that is nearby that is pre-warp, but has been under the Federation observation for quite some time. Recently, that planet had a gemstone of historical significance stolen, and that gemstone has to be returned. Otherwise, the planet is going to break out into civil war. Please go to this planet, the planet's known as Halise, and return whatever it is that you found, and also solve who stole this thing, because it's very irksome and we need to prove that it was internal. But remember, they don't yet know that we're involved, and although we don't normally get involved, we believe it was an external source, because we may have detected a Klingon bird of prey in orbit ever so slightly 5 days ago. So the Federation ship and the PCs have to go to Halise. They have to get into disguise, which is always fun. They beam down as investigators and they start to investigate. The Halise Red, which is the name of this ruby, was kept in a chamber that had an observation window, which was about 4 inches of thick, pure, transparent aluminum. Let's use that, why not? And an air duct. The air duct was only 5 centimeters in diameter and led out to a ventilation shaft. There's no ways that anyone could have got down that air duct, and of course the egg itself would clear the air duct with millimeters on either side. So, and it's not like the air duct is directly above the plinth on which the egg is displayed. It's in the corner of the room. All CCTV footage of the time, because let's say this pre-warp space is, I don't know, 1990s Earth. Why not? So they've got CCTV footage that's black and white and in the corner of the room. And all of the CCTV footage does is it shows the room filling up with liquid, and then the liquid being sucked out of the room and the egg going with it. Our first hint at the changeling. Our PCs can then investigate the staff. They can discover that one of the staff members started to act strangely about 4 or 5 months ago, give or take. But after a while, seemed to calm down and everything was okay. The apartment of said staff member, assuming that the PCs get to this point, the apartment of the staff member is basically devoid of anything unusual except for an entire array of equipment designed to create perfect forgeries. Perfect forgeries. And in this case, there are 2 more Halise Reds just ready and waiting to be sold. The Halise Red that the Federation recovered from the Ferengi is a duplicate. It's not the original. The original is still at large. However, civil war begins to break out on Halise, and the PCs are forced to decide, do they just return the duplicate, because the technology on Halise is not sufficient to learn that it is a fake. And some could argue, well, maybe this is not a fake, this is the original one, and the original one was actually just a fake to begin with. Things can always be said. And so the moral dilemma is, do we return the egg and prevent the war, or do we continue this investigation? The only other thing that's been discovered is, of course, that Klingon bird of prey that was in orbit for a few seconds just after the heist itself, and the missing worker is now completely missing, cannot be found whatsoever. With some snooping and some research and looking into CCTV footage, it's possible that the crew can discover that this individual went for a walk in a park and walked into the park with one particular motion and walked out with a very different motion. And then they can go and dig up the body of the individual that the changeling killed, if they so desire. They then, of course, have to hand over the egg, and that resolves the mission. Federation is absolutely happy with the entire state of affairs. Halise continues without civil war, and everyone is lauded as a hero. Except, of course, that one missing original, or whatever it is still out there. Anyway, that's the end of Adventure 1. Adventure 2 would then be a ship-based adventure that is something is happening on the ship and has nothing to do with our Borg campaign. This would be something that you as the GM would look to your player characters' backstories, to their interests, their hobbies, their pastimes and things, and make an adventure out of that. Now, it's important that we intersperse the campaign adventures with regular adventures, because otherwise it doesn't really feel like a campaign. It feels more like just a single long giant adventure, which may be what you're going for. But again, it's the difference between making a feature film, giant long form adventure, and making a campaign series like Deep Space Nine or Voyager or any of the more recent series that have a continuous storyline, Picard in particular. And so that's my idea for our opening adventure. Adventure 3 would now be going back to chasing this changeling. Same MO, a faceless trader does something. Something gets stolen, something gets done, something gets happening, something gets taken, someone gets abducted. We'll figure that one out as we need to. And also, we'll figure it out after our players have decided what they're doing about these fakes, about these copies, right? Because it might not sit well with them. They might try and pursue it, or they might ignore it completely. We've got to take our cues, so there's no point in writing it just yet. I would love your input. If you've got an idea and you think, hey, this could work really well, or let's change this, or let's change that, or Adventure 3 could be X, or it could be Y, leave your thoughts in the comments down below. It would be really, really cool for us to collectively build this campaign. Next week, we go and have a look at character advancement and character progression within Star Trek Adventures 2. And this was a request by Ryan Auld. So there's a whole show coming just for you, Ryan, and the rest of us get to benefit by having a look at this. And I had a wonderful conversation with two absolutely amazing individuals on the topic. So don't miss that next week. Anyway, until then, I wish you and yours long life and happy gaming.